Welcome to Stress-Free IEP. You do not need to do it all alone. With your host, Frances Shefter, Principal of Shefter Law. You can get more details and catch prior episodes at www.shefterlaw.com. The Stress-Free IEP video podcast is also posted on YouTube and LinkedIn, and you can listen to episodes through Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, and more. Now, here's the host of Stress-Free IEP, Frances Shefter.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the show. Today's special guest I'm so excited to have is Jamilah Bashir, who is the IEP coach. And I have to tell you, I am so excited to have her because I love watching her social media. So first of all, if you're not following her, you need to go follow her. She's got awesome posts. So Jamilah, please, pop on, let us know, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Thank you so much. So yes, follow me at the IEP Coach LLC, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, all that. But thank you so much for having me. First of all, I'm just so excited to be here. We finally were able to, connect, and just your whole story. That's so amazing, like I said. But yes, I'm Jamilah, aka the IEP Coach, and I'm the founder and lead consultant of the IEP Coach LLC. We are an education consulting company, and we specialize in providing special education-centered support to teachers, paraprofessionals, instructional assistants, and parents. So we do that through professional development. We do it through coaching. We do it through parent workshops. So our focus is clearly special education. That is a huge passion of mine. And I fell in love with special education due to my little sister having an intellectual disability. So that's where the passion grew from. And then helping my mom, educating my mom while I was in school, sharing information with her. That's where my love for advocating for parents came from. And then being a SPED teacher myself, then being a SPED supervisor, that's where my love for supporting teachers came from. So we find it best supporting teachers as well as parents, because in the end, ultimately, it benefits the student.
Right. It's because we're all a team, and I love it because it's so similar to my story of being a former teacher in special ed and then the leader. And it's, there's another special ed attorney, and I joke around a lot about that we need to do a course for teachers of how not to get sued, which, I mean, probably you put it a little bit better, just training on the IEPs, because, I don't know your experience, but I know from even when I was a teacher, we're never really taught how to write IEPs.
No, you're not. It's like, okay, you got a degree in special education. You got your license. Okay, here. And it's like you're thrown in there. And it's like when you're in college, you don't really learn the basics of writing an IEP and leading an IEP meeting. Therefore, when you get out into the field, you make mistakes, especially if you don't have a coach and you don't have someone showing you, giving you that immediate feedback, showing you how to do it. This is what you have to say. This is how you need to write that. This is how you need to address the parent. If you don't have that, you will make those mistakes. And unfortunately, some of those mistakes can land your district in a lawsuit.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And I feel bad because, these new teachers are thrown out there and having to deal with it and having to do stuff. And allegedly there's, higher ups that are supposed to be supporting them, the instructional specialists or whatever they call them in the specific areas, but they're not always supporting because they have too many to support.
Right.
And so,
right.
Yeah.
Right. Because some caseloads, depending where you are, if you don't have enough special education teachers, it's like, okay, well, you already divvied the kids out amongst the teachers you have, and you already gave them too much. So now if you are the special education liaison, or if you're the supervisor in your school, you have to take the rest because you can't put the rest on those teachers. And it's like, you barely have time to do it because you're supposed to be coaching, honestly, and supporting not just the SPED teachers, but gen ed teachers too, with differentiated instruction, etc. But you can't because you're bombarded with all this paperwork. And that's something that gets me, is where you have schools, yes, they have their SPED director or they have their SPED supervisors, but they can't really get in the classrooms to coach the teachers. It's like, okay, we did PD in the beginning of the year. Okay, everyone has their caseload. If you got a question, email me. They're trying to keep their head above water.
Right.
And they can't really support you.
Right. And to say, if you have a question, email me. Well, with new teachers, I didn't know what I didn't know. Like we're just doing what we got to do.
Right.
Or as my business coach says, we're building the plane as we're flying in the air. Because you kind of like, don't know, but, right?
That's exactly what it's like. It's like, and I hate saying this, like you get thrown to the wolves, but
Yep. But it's true.
That's what it feels like. You're either, if you want to use thrown to the wolves, or you're thrown into the ocean and you either are going to sink, or you're going to do as much as you can to keep your head above water to breathe until you get to shore. And it's like when you get to the breaks throughout the year, it's like, oh my God, I can breathe now. But even sometimes with that, you're like, you may take work with you home because you're like, oh, I'm not at work. I can really get caught up on my IEPs or on progress monitoring, etc. And then it's like you didn't really have a break because you were working.
And I remember when I taught that summer was like June was the end of June, beginning of July was all of our time was spent on going to the doctors because we've neglected all of our doctors and our health all year. And then it's like, okay, I'm good. I've gotten all the doctors. I can relax. I can enjoy my summer. And then it's like, oh my God, it's August already.
Yes, it's like you blink and it's like time to go back. It's like, yes.
Right. Yeah. So it's definitely, but I love also, like you say, that it's collaboration. Like I always say at my IEP meetings, I tell the teachers, I tell the team, I'm like, look, yes, I am an attorney. Yes, I have the law degree, but I'm also a mom and I was a teacher and I was a special ed teacher and I get it. We're here to focus on the child and to work as a team on the child. And I know that's a big thing that you say is why the teachers and the parents had to collaborate. How do you help with that to make, get our village stronger?
Well, for one, with the parents, I do explain the whole process because a lot of parents don't understand the process and don't understand, oh, this is how long the evaluation process will take. This is how long it's going to take to write an IEP, just so they understand okay, this is the timeline of things. And then also understand how you're at work, the teacher is at work too. So they may not be able to get on a phone call with you to have a conversation. You can get a quicker response if you email them. And then also just taking into account, being mindful, if you do get on the phone with them, they may have 10 minutes. They may have 15 minutes. You know what I mean? And then from the teacher side, just being mindful of when the parent is working and when they're not working. Do they prefer a phone call? Do they prefer you to text them? Just that information, and just even keeping open communication, oh, here's something that may be beneficial to your child, or, oh, just a reminder, I'm going to be doing boom, 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 boom with, what I mean? Just keeping that communication open. Even if they don't email you back or call you back, the fact that they know you're constantly reaching out to them, they notice it, what I mean? And they see it. So they may feel more comfortable to open up to you. But it's very, very important to build connections with your parents, and parents building the connection with the teacher as well, just so that you are both just on a united front and keeping the students' needs at the front.
Right.
Focus on their needs, you'll be good. I say that all the time. Focus on what the kid needs, we'll all be good.
Exactly. That's so true. I had a client, and now I tell other clients to do it, that brings a picture of the kid for all the meetings. Because this is who we're talking about.
Right.
It's not this paper. We're talking about this child and what this child needs.
Right.
And I know the communication is a big thing. I think a lot of times when I look at cases, when they get to the point of me filing due process, I look at it and I'm like, you know what? There was a breakdown in the communication at this point. Mm-hmm. And that's what happened. And then the disagreement started, and then it kept building, and now we're litigating it. Right. Whereas if that open communication and honesty was there in the beginning, it might not have gotten to this point.
Right. Absolutely. And then also with some parents, sometimes I would get so many different phone numbers, and I'm just like, okay, which one can I reach you? And then sometimes the parents don't want to be reached. And I'm like, it's very, very important. It's like, it was to the point, like, sometimes I'm talking to the student, I'm like, it is very important that you tell your parents, whoever is taking care of you, grandma, whoever's taking care of you, it is very important that they contact me because I need to have a conversation. It is, you know what I mean? That was, I want to say, when it got to that point, sometimes I'm like, okay, going to my principal, I think we need to have someone go to the house because it's very important because I don't want this kid to go out of compliance. I don't want that to happen. Right. It's very important that I get in contact with this parent, whatever. And then there were some parents who would say, you know what, you can call me at work. And I'm like, okay, thank you. And I'm like, don't worry, I'm just going to call you just about that. But it's like, when that communication is not there, then it's like, okay, the parent's going to make assumptions of what's going on. You're making assumptions about what the parent, like, oh my God, that parent didn't call me back, but you may not realize the parent may work nights. So they're sleeping, in the morning, like halfway through the day because they work at night, So it's like you said, having that clear communication. So that way it kills any assumptions. And just like you said, just being very honest about your situation. So that way the school can plan accordingly, because then, like, say if you're in some type of, need as a parent, there are resources the school that can connect you with, or it's something that the school can do for you, but we won't know unless, you're honest about the situation.
Right. And it's, I don't think a parent ever is like, oh my God, that teacher is the worst teacher ever. Well, never mind. I probably, there are sometimes, but it's rare like that, right? Right. But even then, you don't go into teaching for the money. We all know that.
Yeah.
And if you go into teaching for the love of the children and to teach the children. Mm-hmm. And so maybe they're not a great teacher, but their heart is in the right place. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of, every time I say, I do not bash teachers ever. Their jobs are hard enough. Do they make mistakes? 100%. Do I have to point out those mistakes if we're litigating? Yes, I do, because that's my job. Mm-hmm. And their job is to do their job, which I understand is difficult at times, and they need to be asking for help. And that's always a challenge. But there's a lot of times I'll tell clients at the beginning of the year, and I do this with my own kids, like at the open house if you can, or just set up a quick meeting with the teacher at the beginning of every school year. Just have a quick little, hey, here are some things that might be helpful. For me, right. Like, for example, so my older daughter needs a little calm down place, and she needs a little tight space that nobody can see her. And that's and if she doesn't have that, she's going to go to the bathroom and find a place or go sit in her locker. So at the beginning of the school year, I talked to the teacher. I'm like, hey, just letting you know. And she goes, this teacher was phenomenal because she said, oh yeah, we already have it figured out. It's over there. And she knows when to do it and she knows how to do it and it's all good. But she's a seasoned teacher. With a newer teacher, might not have known that. So it's kind of like, let's have that conversation with the teacher of being like, look, I want to support you. Let's talk together of what we can do to make this a good experience for everyone.
Yeah, I always tell parents, like, in the beginning of the year, like, have a meeting with the whole team, like have a meeting with all your kids' teachers, let them know, like, listen, I'm not trying to take up all your time. This will last no more than 15 minutes, but you may just want to share some information or, anything like that. And it's easy to have, I got all your teachers here. Perfect. I'm so-and-so's mom, dad, whatever, just share that information about your child. And then also it's a nice way for you to put names with faces, even though you might forget, but like you can put names with faces, you know what I mean? And they can, get to meet you and understand, like, okay, this parent is involved or whatever. And also you're able to answer questions that you may have just about a particular subject or anything like that. I've had several parents do that.
Right. Yeah, no, and it opens that communication. I know, as a teacher, remembering when the parents would come in, and I was always appreciative because, like, yeah, we get an IEP, we get a piece of paper to read about our kid. That doesn't tell us anything about the child. When a parent comes in and gives me that little bit of information, and always what I like to share is that we're not trying to take up your time. We're not trying, we just want to save time later. Like, let's be proactive now to put this stuff in place so that we have that open line of communication so we don't have difficulties later.
Right. And then when I was still in the classroom, I would always review all my IEPs. Like, I had a clipboard. I was writing the kid's name down. I'm like, okay, well, who has related services? How often? I'm writing all things down, and any particular SDIs that may be out of the norm that I've never really seen. I make sure I write those down. And once the school year starts, it's like, okay, I know who gets check in, check out, etc. And if I see anything new with the student and I don't see it listed in the IEP, I contact the previous case manager. I have no problem doing it because I'm like, wait a second, I don't see any of this in the IEP. What's going on here? You know what I mean? Because I'm like,
Right.
I doubt this just started this year. I'm sure this was occurring previously. You know what happened?
Right.
You know, so yeah, like, and that's just extra time that you have to do. And again, if you don't have a coach or somebody helping you with that and guiding you through that, you're like, oh my, you get overwhelmed just by looking at an IEP because it's so thick. And it's like, no, flip through this section, go to this section. Okay.
Right.
You know, skim through. This is going to tell you about the kid. Now flip to this section. This is going to tell you what to do for this kid. And then this section, okay, here are the goals. Like, you know what I mean? It's like, you gotta, again, if you don't have no one showing you that, how to do that, it can be extremely overwhelming.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And then depending on your school system, because all the school systems do it differently on what the IEP looks like. You know, federal law says these are the 8 parts that have to be in an IEP.
Right.
They say nothing about the order or any of the other sorts. So it's confusing. And, you know, the only reason I'm as good as I am is I've been in the industry for 30 years. So I've been reading IEPs and looking at them. And that's something what I always say for parents is that talk to a coach, talk to an advocate, talk to an attorney, just to see what's going on and making sure things are okay. You know, we don't know what we don't know, and we don't know what to ask. You know?
Right. And then if you move, you may assume, oh, services are going to be the same. No, like if you move, definitely look into the state that you're moving to see what is available for your child, because you may have been perfect. It may have been great for your kid here and you're moving, and it's understandable. You're moving for a bigger house or something like that, but they may not have the level of services that you had in your previous state. And it's like, or how they do their IEPs and IEP meetings are completely different. And it's like, there is, like you said, there is no law saying, oh, you have to do it this way. It's just, hey, you got to make sure you have the meeting. You got to make sure you go through these sections. You know, every IEP has the same sections, but how thorough each section is, there's no law for that.
Right. Right. And I love that you say that with the moving, because I definitely have had, potential clients call me or even current clients that are thinking about moving, and they're like, okay, so we're thinking about moving. Where do you recommend? And like where I am in Montgomery County, it's the W schools is what everybody always says. Winston Churchill, Wooten, Whitman, and Walter Johnson are the W schools, and everybody always says those are the best feeder patterns. But yes, those might be the top rated high schools, but that doesn't mean they're appropriate for everybody. You know, and there are definitely times that I recommend, I was like, well, you know, like this school has XYZ program. So even if your child is not eligible for that program, like for an autism program, even if your child is not eligible for the autism program, if your child has autism, going to a school that has that, the school in a whole knows more and is more accepting of kids with autism.
Right.
It makes a difference.
It really does. You can tell schools where I want to say the culture is very inclusive and accepting. And I feel like it definitely does start at the top versus a school where it's not, because I'm like, if that's not the regular norm for you to be accepting of someone else's differences, then it's like, oh, it stands out to you. It becomes a problem. You know what I mean? Because then you have students finding a problem, and then you may even have some teachers that don't intervene to stop something from happening because that's not the culture. You know, that's not the culture of school, right? And then also, it's the same even when you go to different charter schools. You may love that school, but they don't have what your child needs. And then as a parent, you're making the decision, do I keep my child here or do I find another school? And I've had some parents where they'll keep them at the school, and we're explaining we don't have the level of service that they need, you know, and I'm documenting it in the email. I'm documenting it through phone calls. I'm like, I understand why you have them here, but we're doing a disservice to them. They need more of this. And that's a hard decision for a parent to have to make.
Always. Yeah. I mean, we all say it all the time. Parenting is hard. We never know, what's right, and what's right for one child might not be right for the next.
Right.
But that's the other thing is to be important is looking at your child and what your child's needs are.
Exactly.
Sometimes public school is the right place. We'll get the right services. Sometimes a special education school is what's needed. Sometimes you got to find a way to pay for a private school, because just the nature of your child's disability. The law is clear that, and I keep forgetting the case name, but one of the Supreme Court cases says school districts don't have to provide Cadillac services. Chevrolet services are okay. And it's funny because I used to say that and I didn't know where I got it. And then I remembered it was actually in a case law. So it wasn't, those aren't my words, those are their words. But we just have to do mediocre. And if you want more for your child, sometimes stepping out of the public schools might be what you need to do.
Mm-hmm. It is, and it's unfortunate for some parents, especially you have multiple children, you're trying to keep everybody at the same school.
Oh yeah.
The distance, we may have found a perfect school for your child, but it's like, oh wait, it's all the way over there. Your other kids go to school over here. It's very difficult. And then it's like, okay, if you don't want to do that, okay, well, what are you willing to do extra to supplement your child's support?
Right. Yeah.
That's hard.
Yeah, and what is it worth to you? How much
you value it.
Right. Like this is your kid's life,
Right.
Where are we looking at it in the balance? And not saying, and that's not saying that people that don't do certain things aren't caring about their child or valuing education. It's just, you put things in perspective and what is more important. And sometimes home life is more important, and that makes sense, and sometimes, I will drive to 20 different schools if I have to, because this child getting that support is that important.
Exactly.
Yeah, and it's not judging. It's just, what works for you and your family is what's important.
Right. And I think, parents have to remember that, like, do what's going to work for you and your family, and understand, like, and you know how sometimes, like, you talk to your friends about things, because you're like, oh, so-and-so has a child that has a disability, but understand that their child needs are different from your child needs.
Yep.
So they may need this particular service. That doesn't mean that your child needs that particular service. So just understanding that your kid has your needs, you do what's best for you and your family.
Right.
Your friend is doing what's best for them and their family with their child's needs.
Right. Even if it's the same diagnosis. Because
yes.
everybody's different,
No two people with autism are exactly the same, like have the exact same needs, or even someone that has a learning disability have the exact same needs. That's why you have an IEP. It's individualized.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, that's why. So, yeah. But you find that sometimes it's like, oh, my friend child has da-da-da, and they get that. I'm like, it's possibly because they require that. Your child does not.
Right. And we need to support it. And
right.
you need to support it with the data, right?
Absolutely. I'm glad you said
so,
that. Data drives it all day. The data drives everything.
Thank you. I'm not going to elaborate on that, but yes, data drives everything. And so, I tell parents all the time to put things in writing. I'm trying to think of how to word it. But, like, obviously the school's supposed to collect data because that's their job. What can the parents do to help make sure that this is happening?
I always tell parents to always give physical copies of their IEP and the progress reports. So then that way, you can just keep track, like, okay, am I getting a progress report? Like I'm supposed to be getting a progress report. And then also when it comes to your progress report, I tell parents all the time, you want to see the data in the progress report. So you want to see a chart, you want to see explanation of that chart. You know what I mean? And I said things like that. Because you need to see, okay, well, how often were you assessing my child on this particular skill? So you want to see things like that. And I said, hey, if your teacher said, oh my God, Johnny is doing amazing, you can say, oh, can you show me, please? Oh, can you show me that homework? Can you show me that test? You know what I mean? So that way, you can see, because I always saved all of my students, all of their tests, all of their quizzes, and all of their assessments. So that way, if a parent asked me, I had it. I gave back homework and classwork, but I kept their quizzes and their assessments. I allowed them to see it, but then I collected it back So that way, when I'm meeting with your parent, I can show them, oh, here's one quiz. Oh, here's the, like, because I taught English. So sometimes you're like, well, how am I going to get progress monitoring on English? You know what I mean?
Right.
And so what we would do in my school, we call them journals. You can call them code writes, but we always make sure we did 4 per quarter. So that way we have 4, we knew we will have 4 data points. And with the journals, they didn't get to edit it. It was just like, okay, we've been practicing these skills. So now here, and it wasn't like, oh, a full blown essay. No, here, it's just a paragraph. I want to see how you improve from the last time we've done it. And so when it was time to do their IEP meeting, or when it was time to do progress monitoring, their case manager knew, come in, you can take their folder because you'll have all the writing probes you need to do your progress monitoring. So then with the progress report, we basically was like, okay, we did it on this date, this date, this date. Here are the errors in writing that you needed to, this is your writing goal. You're focusing on these 3 areas. And we had a rubric that we all used.
Right.
And that's how we tracked it. It's like, when schools have systems, it makes it, I want to say, manageable and easier for teachers to keep track of data. When you don't have any systems, everybody's doing their own thing. And then you get parents just like, wait a second. Okay, I got a report, but I don't get it. What does this mean? And it's like, the progress report, it should be clear to the parent. The parent should be able to look at that, see a chart, and be like, oh, okay, you did it on this date. They got this score. You did it again on this date, they got these scores. And then there's an explanation of the chart. So I always tell parents, look for data. Always look for data. And if a teacher comes to you to say, oh, well, I think we need to do XYZ for Ashley, and you can ask, like, what do you mean do this for Ashley? Where's your data? Where's your data to support we need to do this for my child? And I always say 6 weeks worth of data. Because that's it's not just, oh, it happened one time and everyone's in uproar like, oh my God. It's like, no, how many times has it been happening repeatedly? And like, and as a teacher, if you're seeing something like that, grab a piece of paper, write down the time, and you can do tally marks. You can write the behavior and then do tally marks or something. So, you know, this is how many times this has been happening. You don't always have to have a fancy chart. You can just actually literally take notes in a notebook and you're writing down what's happening. That's data too.
Right. Yeah, but there needs to be something to support anything that you do.
Exactly. That's just like, I always tell people, I'm like, you know, you go to the doctor. If a doctor tells you you're pregnant, you're like, where are the results? You may not even go to yourself. You're like, where are the results? You know, or even if they say, oh, you have this disorder or you have this going on, you want to see the results.
Right.
So you want to see the data. So same thing applies with education. If someone says, oh, your child is failing, they've been failing, show me.
Right.
Show me where have they been failing? You know, sometimes as teachers, it's like, you might see something twice. It's like, oh my gosh, mom, dad, we have to, and it's like, pause. Okay. You saw it. Okay. What did you do to kind of see, if it's something that you could change to help that kid be successful. Like sometimes I had students, they may have bombed the test. I'm going to say, you know what? I want you to take this in the morning because it's the afternoon now. I'm going to give you you want to come back? I'm changing the order of these questions. I want you to take this again because I think you were tired.
Right. You
know, I've done it. I could have easily just took that, but I'm like, okay, it's the afternoon. You just came from lunch. You know what I mean? It's things like, it's not that that's the case all the time, but something small like that. Or you know what? I see that you're struggling with this. Let me do a small group with you and see if this helps. Or let me give you a graphic organizer, see if this helps you. Versus going into uproar immediately. It's like, let's take a moment. Let's do some tier 1 interventions. Right. That helps you to collect your data too. So then that way, even with you doing your tier 1 interventions in the classroom, then we can say, you know what? Listen, the teacher has all this data. They've done A, B, C, and D, and the student is still struggling. Let's do a tier 2 intervention and see if that helps. You know what I mean? And then that also helps the parent, I want to say, be more accepting when they see the data, because it's like, oh, I see that you didn't just say my child has this or my child's struggling with this. You actually have been working with my child to be successful, and this is what you have done.
Right. And then for the parents to keep that data, like if they ask for it and it's not given to them, like put it in writing. You know, like I asked for this on this day. You said you did tier 1 interventions for the last 6 weeks. I haven't seen any data. Please start collecting data now and report in 2 months. You know, and have it in writing so that, like, you know, holding the schools accountable. And, you know, like the teacher in me is like, oh my God, putting more on the teachers. But you know what? That's your job. That's what you signed up for. And that's what it is.
You're right. And then also just reaching out to other team members to help you too. Again, because like I didn't give tests to parents. Like I would make a copy. I'm like, I can't give you the original. Here, I can give you a copy of this, but I can't give you the original or whatever. But yeah, and then also as a teacher, keep the data that you have collected, even after that student has moved on, keep it for another year, because something can come back. I'm telling you, something can happen. They're like, oh, when they were in your class last year, once my students moved on to 8th grade, I still kept everything for like a whole year, just in case. And I remember one particular year, a lawyer came. The dad wanted his son to go to a special education school. He was trying to paint the picture that we failed his son in the school and all that. And I'm just like, his son did great. He would get test anxiety. He always bombed tests, but he would do well in class. And thank God I still had that folder. I still had his folder of all his quizzes he took, all his assessments that he took, all the writing that he did. I still had it. So I was able to share it with our district lawyer so that they could and we all were on the same page as teachers. Like, his son did, you know, he worked as hard as he could, you know, but, you know, you definitely, you know.
You need the data to support it. You can't just say
data drives everything. And also as a teacher, it protects you because you're doing what you need to do. And then even as a parent, like if you're seeing something in your child, take out even if you open up a note on your phone, you can write yourself a note. So then that way, if you ever need to go to your child's primary care physician, you have your data. Right. It may be a notebook, it may be notes, it may be audio messages you left. Right. That's data for you too.
Right. One of the things I do often is, you know, like I look at if my daughter's had a really rough morning, you know, I'll usually email the teachers and be like, just FYI, she's had a rough morning, you know, to prep them for it, to be like, you know, be a little more gentle because we know she's probably coming in dysregulated. But it's even like looking at that and seeing when you get a note from the teacher saying that, hey, your child did XYZ today, which is not usual behavior, taking the step back and looking at what else has been happening in this child's life as the parent that could be causing that. And then let's talk to the teacher about how to address it differently.
Right. So just having that communication is extremely helpful too. Because like you said, the parent can say, oh, well, it was a rough night last night. You know, it could have been something happening in the family. It could be a family loss or loss of a pet or somebody sick. It could just be so many things going on, and it causes the child to, you know, not be themselves going to school. So like, yes, when you get that information as a teacher, it is extremely helpful. You know what I mean? You can do your check-ins. And then also even on the school side, being able to notify a parent, like, listen, I got the results of, what was it? It was student government. I'm like, we got the results. And hey, he did not get the role that he wanted. Somebody else won. And he had a whole breakdown. So after that, anytime he tried out for something, the teacher that was in charge, I'm like, please let me know the results before you share it with him, because I need to tell his parents so that way they can kind of prep him before he comes to school. So please notify me. So that I can notify the parent. And they were very appreciative of that, because I don't think people understand you have to either be working with children who have needs, or you have a child yourself or someone in your family to understand that feeling when they are, in the eyes of the child, they're in crisis. In their eyes, they are in crisis. And the amount of time it takes for them to decompress and come down. It can take anywhere from, 15 minutes, and it can take over an hour sometimes. So if we can do whatever we can do to minimize that from happening, a
Exactly.
meltdown, absolutely, let's do what we need to do. Absolutely. Even though in the moment, you're also teaching them strategies on how to, yes, I don't like the outcome. I don't like it. Okay, what do I have control of? What can I do about it? You know what I mean? Because you are, yes, you want to allow them to have that moment to decompress, but also at the same time, understanding like this is, in life, these things happen. We don't get what we want all the time. And it's like the
Right.
quicker we can accept that, we can move on. And then it's like, okay, what can I do different the next time so that way that does not happen? It's so much going on in that moment.
Right.
So it's like when people, how people make comments about parents and their kids or even sometimes teachers, I'm just like, you have no idea
Yep.
what they deal with, parent or even a teacher. The parent may be allowing that because you know what? If I take this, it's going to turn into something else. I don't have the
Right.
energy right now. You know what I
Yep.
mean?
Okay.
And it's like you got to give people grace.
Yep. And that's like, it always makes me crazy because schools still do it, is that when the kids are misbehaving, they take away recess. Seriously? Usually kids are misbehaving because they have extra energy or anxiety. How do you think they're going to get rid of that? Recess. Like, and that's the thing, is like looking at when a child becomes dysregulated, if you haven't been able to prevent it, why is the child dysregulated and what can we do to bring the child out of? Like, and every child is different. Like, for example, my daughter you do not talk to my daughter. When she gets to that point and she goes to her small space, don't talk to her, don't interact, just let her be. When she's processed and done her thing, she'll come back and then we can talk it through. Like, as you were saying, it's better being proactive of like, let's prep somebody and teach them when this news happens, this is how we can deal with that upset emotion.
Mm-hmm. Right. And then there are going to be times where, hey, it happens and we have to deal with it. I've even had some parents who, you may refer to them as helicopter parents, trying to remove every obstacle. And I'm like, no, we don't want to do that. And I understand you being as proactive as possible, but I'm like, then you will always do that the rest of their lives. Right. And then you may get mad at a certain point, like, you're old enough, you should, but it's like you never gave them the opportunity to do it, to mess up, and you support them in, what can we do better? And I never get the nurse at my old school, she said, do you want to continue to carry your kid and walk through the mud for them, or walk through the mud with them and then teach them how to clean themselves off? And I was just like, that is perfect, because, you do want to get the support for your child, but then also you want to make sure you are not stunting their growth at the same time. Exactly. And I did learning support and I did emotional support. So when I did emotional support, yes, that's like a whole other level of patience and tolerance that I had to have. Like I had that student who would, every time something was uncomfortable for her, just leave the classroom. I'm like, sweetheart, you can't leave the classroom because listen, let's pretend I'm your teacher right now. You just left and I don't know where you are. Right. What do you think I'm thinking? She's like, oh, you might think something happened to me. I'm like, exactly. Where are you going? And her place was the bathroom. And I'm like, don't go to the bathroom and sit on the floor. I was like, that's disgusting. Like, the bathroom is nasty. Right. I said, people go there to relieve themselves. Do you want to sit in there? She's like, oh no. I'm like, no. I'm like, so it was like a lot of different things we were trying with her. We did colored cards. We did a red card. We did a yellow card. And I said, well, what do you want yellow to mean? What do you want the red card to mean? So if your teachers see that, what does that mean? And that was something that we implemented for a while. It was working for her. And then there were some days where she was having a meltdown. And my aide knew, okay, if she couldn't, bring her down, then she always knew where I was. And I would take her to my classroom. Wasn't no one in there. She would scream. I thought she was going to flip a couple desks, and I never get someone walking past me like, are you okay? I'm like, I'm fine. I'm fine. But she needed to let that out. Yep. And then after she has let that out, if she was disrespectful in any way, That's when I talk to her. I don't talk to her
Exactly.
while she is in, I'll say, her crisis, in that meltdown. No, because just think about it. He or she's not thinking rationally. That's just like when you're
Right.
upset, you're not, as adults, when we get upset, we're not thinking rationally.
Exactly.
You know? So it's like, don't try to talk to somebody when they're in that moment, because you're not even in position to receive any information, to process the information.
Right.
You know?
Exactly. And it's
And kids are the same way. So it's like afterwards when we talk, she said, I apologize. I shouldn't have said that. Da, da, da. And I was like, okay, so you need to go and apologize. Who else do you need to go and apologize to? Now that she can receive what I'm trying to say to her, she's like, oh, I need to apologize to this person and that person because I shouldn't have said that. And then also, like, even pushing back to her, I'm like, you have to open your mouth and say what it is you need or want. You can't read your mind.
right.
So she would come in. I never forget this one time she didn't do her homework. Miss Bashir, I didn't do my homework. And I just looked at her. I'm like, okay. You're not even trying to help me. I'm like, I don't recall you asking me anything.
Right.
And she's just like, I'm like, do you need help with your homework? Do you need a place to do your homework? I'm like, you need to ask me a question. You didn't ask me a question yet. And I had to tell her, your crisis is not a crisis for me. Your lack of planning, that's not a crisis for me. You know, and I that's how I did talk to a lot of my students, because I had 7th graders. They were older. Right. And I'm like, I talk to them that way because I'm like, I need you to understand that it's a decision you made that put you in this situation.
Right.
And we got to make some better decisions.
Right. And that's thinking, like, when a kid's dysregulated, to teach them, okay, so this is how you reacted in this. What do you think we could have done differently?
Exactly.
That's the cutting through.
It's a process. Like, they got to go through the process to understand, oh, this is what I understand that. Because and every kid is different. Yep. Every kid is different.
And if we have a kid that gets dysregulated and we punish them and put them in timeout or whatever it is, and then never process with them, that child's never going to learn how to process emotions.
Right. Right. And you have to, like, and sometimes with some teachers and some parents, it's like, well, you want to just immediately remove something or give them what you need. I'm like, no, we got to learn. It's like, we got to go through this. It's like going through that transition. So that way they can get to the point where they understand this is the process, so they can start to implement it themselves. That's exactly. It's like if you have a student or a child who has sensory issues, it's like, okay, you're going to have to go to the barbershop. You have to go to the barbershop because you have to get your hair cut. So you know what? We're going to be uncomfortable for a little bit while you get used to going to the barbershop. You know what I mean? We can't remove it. It's something you're going to do until they get used to it, to be like, okay, this isn't going to hurt me. I know when I go there, I'm going to sit here for this many minutes. I'm going to get my hair cut. I'm going to look amazing afterwards. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's like you got to put in that energy in those transition times. Because even think about it when, as an adult, like when something's new for us, we're uncomfortable.
Yep.
But as we do it over and over, it's like, okay, it becomes a routine.
Yep. Exactly. And that's what it's all about. It's teaching our children how to do things and how to advocate themselves. And then also with the IEP coaching stuff, is that teaching the parents and the teachers of how to communicate and how to, because as parents, we're definitely not taught it either. And as we talked about at the beginning, teachers aren't necessarily taught how to collect data or do, IEPs or anything either.
Right.
And
it's so helpful. Yes, it's so helpful. Like you said, parents don't always know what they don't know or don't know what questions to ask. So like, okay, when we do parent workshops, a lot of our parent workshops will focus on IEPs, IEP meetings, or 504 plans. And they're like, oh, okay, I didn't know. And then like, oh, the IEP, okay, that's what that is. Oh, those are the sections. And I actually, because I got so many questions during IEP meetings, that's how we created our master IEP course, because we got so many questions. Like, it was like, well, what's about an IEP and what's an IEP again? And what's that process? And, we had new teachers asking us. That's why we created that course. And then now with our Educators Rise program, it's the coaching program. It's the coaching I never received. And I'm just like, in there, we're going over the laws, we're going over case management, we're going over progress monitoring, and then also analyzing that data. We're going over transition plans, because it wasn't until I changed districts where they sent us to a training. I'm like, oh my gosh, I've been missing out this whole time. You know what I mean? Yeah. How do I communicate with parents? How do I foster those relationships? How do I not get burned out? What are some things I can do so that I don't get burned out? You know what I mean? It's just and then actually having access to somebody who you can ask your questions to, who can show you, oh, this is the way to do it.
Right. Right, exactly. And I want to talk about your course a little bit more. So you have a course.
Sure.
Where can people access it? Who's it designed for? Tell me a little bit about it.
So that is our first baby, the Master the IEP course. That is our first baby. It teaches you how to read and understand an IEP. And again, that course came about from a lot of questions we got from parents and new teachers, and even sometimes related service providers, because they're so used to their section that they put in. They're not really, I'm not going to say they're not worried about the other parts of the IEP, but they don't have to. So it's like when we did the course the first time, it was a reading specialist because we did it live. She was just like, oh, I had no idea, this was in this section. So it's basically for parents, new teachers, and I'll say any new related service providers. Teaches you how to read and understand an IEP. And then also we go over every single last section. We go over the no rep, and we do it with a fine tooth comb, because I'm just like, you have to pay attention to the no rep, why the no rep is important. And then also we go over the invitation.
No rep. What are you referring to with the no rep?
The notice of recommended education placement.
Thank you. It's different in every place.
Oh, okay.
We call it LRE.
Oh, the LRE. Okay, so
least restrictive environment.
Okay,
right.
So in Pennsylvania, we do the last part of the IEP is the no rep, the notice of recommended education placement. Okay. So that's the part where you're documenting, okay, they need this service, they need this placement, this service, this is why they need it. That's the page that the parent actually signs off on.
Okay, that's that we use the prior written notice, PWN, in Maryland. Okay. It's like before, like after the IEP meeting, this is what we discussed, this is why we did or didn't do everything.
Right. And we go over the invitation to the IEP meeting, and then we also go over just the process beforehand, like, oh, this is the time frame in between from when you put in evaluation. It's just basically going over the timeline briefly. But it's a DIY course, so you can go at your own pace. You can pause it, stop it, go. You can, it's 3 parts. If you want to do 3 parts in one day, you can knock yourself out and do it. Also with the course, you get access to our Master IEP ebooks. So we have 2 ebooks, so that when you're done the course, they're like a good reference for you to refer back to. And they go through, it's just like, again, references for you. Like, let's say the course is over for you, but you still have the ebooks as a reference for you. So you can go to www.mastertheiep.com. I try to be consistent with everything.
Yep. No, that's great. And I know they'll put the links in the show notes so people can get it. I just realized the time, and I'm like, this is one of the episodes that I think we could talk all day. There's so much to unpack.
Yes.
But I so appreciate you coming onto the show and sharing. I know you said you were in Pennsylvania. Do you only serve families and schools in Pennsylvania, or do you do other areas?
We travel. So like we'll do some things virtually. We also we'll travel to the state. Some places want a workshop if they want it virtually, do it virtually. If they want it in person, we can do it in person too. So we travel throughout the country for our work, for professional developments, because we're not just working with schools in Pennsylvania, but we work with schools across the country.
That's good to know. So thank you so much. I'm so glad we finally got you on the show and got to connect more.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Stress-Free IEP with your host, Frances Shefter. Remember, you do not need to do it all alone. You can reach Frances through shefterlaw.com, where prior episodes are also posted. Thank you for your positive reviews, comments, and sharing the show with others through YouTube, LinkedIn, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, and more.